Okay, welcome to Asia Fireside Chat. We have almost the whole family here. The whole family, except for those who are away, would be Shady, Emily, and Gabriella. And I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Jeffrey. Oh yeah, Jeffrey. And that sets the tone right away because I'm referring to this as a family. Because in having a group of 12, 2 leaders of 10, we kind of felt like we were one weird big family on a long, odd Southeast Asian vacation that involved schoolwork for 6 weeks. So, and they all, by the looks of their faces, totally loved it the whole time when I called them my children, right? Guys. Okay, so thanks for coming.
Mom and Dad.
Oh, that's a long debate.
There's nothing wrong with having 2 moms.
Thanks for coming a little early. We knew that most of the group, well, the whole group that's here, wanted to share. So by starting a little early, hopefully we have time to hear. I only have 2 questions I'm asking because I knew that in itself could one question could take a long time. We also have some pictures that Kara gathered from classmates, different people who sent in some of their favorites. And there's a book going around that is Jeremy's. Do you want to explain who made that?
So my dad just took my photos from the trip
See with your eyes.
and made me a book for my birthday.
It's a lot of selfies. It's worth looking at. So if I hit play towards the thing, let's see. You did it, sir. I did. So some of these are going to just be, they'll be kind of playing in the background, and at certain points I could maybe pause, but
It was a long trip.
we'd be here all day if we just explained everything. But that's an elephant, so. Okay, so to start, to let these guys know that my plan is really to I'll ask the question. This maybe will just speak for itself. So I'll just ask some questions, and at any time I'll open it, and someone can start, and then others can kind of feed off of that and add your thoughts, and then at a certain point I'll direct us to the next question. If there's a picture you see that you want to explain, I can pause it, and we can do that. That's another elephant. Is it the same elephant or another elephant? Okay, so the first thing to say for those who maybe, I think most everyone here is familiar with the trip, but just to remind you to set the scene. We were gone for 6 weeks in the fall, and we spent 4.5 weeks in Thailand, mainly in Chiang Mai, a city in the northern part of Thailand, with some trips elsewhere in that region, and then we went to Laos for 10 days and did a learning tour with Mennonites and traveled all around Laos and learned about that country, and then came back here and wrapped everything up. So that was the trip. And my first question, which the group has heard in advance, is, yeah?
How long were you in Laos for?
10 days. 10 days, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was cute.
So the first question I had for the group was just for anyone to talk about. Oh my gosh. This is just confusing. I haven't seen these ones before. Okay. For anyone to talk about something that was really meaningful or significant. Once this cycles through, maybe we'll pause. We're not going to get very fast.
Coke. Josh.
Those are bombs. Yeah.
Bomb graders.
Oh, bomb.
Wow, let's
Okay,
go that.
so we'll go back to the pictures after, but to actually place where you're hearing from someone other than me. So if anybody wants to start, I had asked, my first question was, can you just share a little bit
you're there to have fun, you know. So I think that was sort of like a liberation from being back home or just kind of focusing on work or school or whatever. We kind of feel like, you know, you always have all these responsibilities and everything, but yeah, just being able to kind of share with people very openly and laugh and have crazy experiences. I think that was probably one of the most meaningful parts of it.
For me, we were in the Karen village, which is like in the mountains. It's a little hill tribe village, and it's surrounded by jungle. And we like took hikes into the jungle, and like my experience with the woods is like the woods. Like I've never been in a jungle before, and it was amazing. Like the trees were like 50, 60 feet tall. There were vines that could have been poisonous snakes, which was kind of scary, but there were vines that were really cool. And like it was super muddy. I was in flip-flops. Like we were hiking to like get to rice fields and to like see things. And like it was just like the age and the like power just in this like forest, in this jungle. Like it was amazing. Like I've never seen anything that old in my life. And it was just like you could tell that it was old, that it was wise, that it was just almost, it had its own spirit. And you could tell that, and it was amazing.
And for me, there's not like one moment, there's so many moments, but one kind of like collection of moments that really meant a lot was being able to stay in the homestaying family and really get adopted into that family. And just really become just like a daughter of theirs and just kind of go with the flow. And they were always apologizing that they weren't like doing enough, even though we'd like get home at like 9 o'clock at night, like almost every single day. So we were still like doing stuff all the time. But they're like, sorry, we're not taking you. I'm like, no, this is great. Like just kind of I fit right into their like everyday life and got to go like to the markets with them and just I don't know, go pick up the girls from school or just whatever. It was just really become a part of their life for a couple weeks, and that was really special and really neat. And like we still talk or like FaceTime and stuff, so it was really neat to really get to know a different culture and people and just see how open they were to like hearing about my life back home and wanting to know like more about my family too. So that was a really cool thing to be able to share with them.
Alright. I guess on the night that we arrived and we were all really tired from our trip and we got to the hotel and all the girls went to bed and me and Alex and Isaac went and got food and we grabbed a beer and just sat by the canal and just chilled out for a while. It was really, really nice. It was a good moment.
I think you wrote about the food for one of your blog posts. Just the food in general. It's worth writing about. So good. Yeah. We actually heard, being in Thailand, we love Thai food, but we kept hearing that when we got to Laos, the food was going to be better. And I don't know what you guys.
No, not anymore.
What about those?
Some things.
Those fried
They were like trying to be
little
Thai,
birds?
and they couldn't.
I would argue though that day that we were at the MCC office in Maine, they helped
That's
us
true.
learn how to make papaya salad. You were making Lao omelets. Yeah, there was some really good food there. But it was interesting to have in my mind that the food was similar, but how passionately in each country and certain regions they were like, no, no, no. We know what we're doing.
I think Lao food is less greasy maybe
Yeah.
than Thai food.
Yeah. Any other significant moments?
I think the Grand Village was the most meaningful part for me too.
Is that where you ate bugs?
No. Whichever. Just because like we were in nature and it was away from the city and it was nice and quiet and we got to go barefoot everywhere. Like I could just stroll around, go barefoot in the muddy rice So,
Haley saw her first waterfall.
yeah,
on this
first
trip.
one. I cried.
Then we climbed a mountain only to find out Trump won as president.
Whoa, that day.
Literally in the middle of nowhere in northern Thailand.
And I'm walking around for about half an hour trying to get to so that I can tell Kara specifically, as our one American on the trip, who kept being labeled as the American. And we were so trying not to just put her in that category, but when it would come up, anyway, it was a very, I think we could all agree that was a very surreal moment. We were on the top of a mountain, but then Yai, our guide, took us to a helipad that they created, which was just a open dirt space, where the princess of Thailand had once come visit. And he said, do you want to see the helipad where the princess came to visit? So we're walking up, and I'm like, oh, I can maybe get signal on the helipad. And they're all walking, and I'm walking around, and not wanting to actually get the signal to find out what happened, because we were so far away and thinking so differently about everything. And then we all kind of had our responses, and then walked back down the mountain, and we're in this village, and the juxtaposition of how much the U.S. election was still impacting, like our Thai friends that we were with were talking about it and calling about it, but at the same time how much bigger the world is, and it doesn't revolve around Donald Trump, and that was a nice thing to also.
Sarah,
Yeah.
can you just tell us what is the correct village?
Yeah, so one part of the trip that we have been doing for the last, I guess, multiple years is we go a few hours north of Chiang Mai, the city, and go to a village in the mountains. And the Karen people are one of the ethnic tribes in Thailand, and have also population in Myanmar or Burma, and are a people group that have been displaced in certain places, who've been a minority group who have not been well treated by the government in a lot of instances, language, privileges taken away. In this case, this community has intentionally chosen to stay off the grid, so they're only a few kilometers from a power source, but they choose to be off the grid because they've become actually world-renowned through Oxfam and some other organizations, world-renowned for their practices in terms of sustainable agriculture and rice farming. And so we've been able to connect with them through the university, Chiang Mai University, but through a man who has his own company who hosts us and brings us there for a few days to talk to the people about what they've been doing and some of the traditional practices that are a little misunderstood. There's some definitely conflicting reports on what people think about some of the traditional, like what you might think of as slash and burn practices, but that when you hear it from the traditional perspective, you realize it's not actually as harmful as we sometimes hear about if it's done in the traditional way. So we get to go and spend 3 days in this community. This time around, it was very unusually rainy, and it changed everything. And we kind of showed up, and this whole community works around their rice harvest schedule. So everything we did was based around whether they could harvest the rice that day, and if the rain was coming, they had to go harvest. So our plans got totally changed. We were hiking in very muddy, slippery, mountainous situations. The kind of picture like a domino effect where, like, if one person slipped, we'd all slide down the mountain. It wasn't terrifying at all. But it was really, I think, an interesting snapshot to see how much, talking about nature and being connected to that, how much we don't understand sometimes the impact of the environment around you and how much that really can dictate what a community does or doesn't.
It was special to be off the grid, and we went out one day to gather fruits and veggies from their orchards, and then they used that to make our lunch. So directly saw that living off the land, and also how the community helped each other harvest their rice, and how their survival depended on
nice too because we were in Chiang Mai and it was so busy and it's a huge city. And it's busy and there's cars and going to university and hustle and bustle, and then to go to the Korean village and just like it's so quiet. There's like little kids running around, you can like go play or like go for a walk.
The air was so clean.
Yeah.
It's not quiet at 4 in the morning.
Okay, yeah. The roosters. You're right.
Earplugs.
Earplugs.
Okay.
So good.
Are there any, I'm just thinking, we've been chatting a lot about Thailand, and I think Laos will still come up, and we were in Thailand for a longer period of time. But this was the first time that for an SSU trip that we've been to Laos. Does anyone here know much about that country? Anything about that country?
Only from what you shared.
That for us was, I would say, to give a little context and then open it back up, that you can maybe, I would have assumed, being close to Thailand and learning a little bit more about Vietnam, Cambodia, some of the other countries in that region, that you could maybe assume certain things about a country based on, oh, it's a similar culture, similar climate, similar languages, etc. But of course, it's a great reminder that even in Canada, regionally, don't brandish us the same as the West Coast, because we're not. But in a certain region of the world, country to country, there are so many differences, and the impact of specifically the Vietnam War in Laos and what actually was happening simultaneously in that country was there was a set of about 9 years where the U.S. was bombing Laos so heavily. It's actually the most heavily bombed country in the world to this day. Still holds that title as, in terms of how many bombs were dropped per minute over the course of 9 years. And people didn't know that until about the early 70s, around 1970. There was a special Senate committee in the U.S. that came out publicly and tried to hold the government accountable and say, publicly, we've been neutral in terms of our stance toward Laos, but actually we've been bombing them very heavily daily, minute by minute, for 6 years already, and then continue for a few more years. And so because of that, there's still a huge, huge number of unexploded ordnances. It's not just the bombs that were dropped that exploded, the bombs that dropped that never exploded that are still all over the country. A very rural country, not as many cities, and so the impact of that, we kind of showed up. It's a communist country, still closed off in some ways, and I think the difference for us, the 10 days stepping into that was pretty significant and felt like a very, for me, I'll just say a privilege, because there were people we met with there and things we heard that we wouldn't be able to find, like research that the group was doing for projects. They couldn't find stuff on the internet, and then you got to sit with people and learn about things that we wouldn't have at all been able to hear just because of the lack of information on some topics coming up. So on that, any other significant, I mean, it kind of overlaps maybe into my second question, but any thoughts on that?
I can share. My most meaningful or significant moment was we went to this museum called the Cope Center. There's a picture of it. And if I mess things up, it was a museum that is, it educates about they call it the Secret War on Laos versus the Vietnam War, like perspective. And it educates visitors about what happened, like what Sarah just said. And so it was a really heavy place to visit because it's talking about how many innocent lives were lost because of the states choosing to bomb, and not even just with particular bombs, but with, there's a picture of cluster bombs, which kill people instead of like artillery or like tanks, that kind of thing. So we visited there, and so it's really heavy. But then I think the next day or later that day, we visited MCC, and I got to talk to, I think his name was Yai too. Yeah, okay, I think his name, I think it was Yai, yeah. And he asked like, oh, how's your day going? Like, and I just like cried, and because we just went to the Cope Center, and he just understood, and he didn't like laugh at me or joke at me that like I was being emotional, or like, because it's his people that have been so hurt, and like he knew people, and like so yeah, it was funny to be consoled by someone else for their country, and I was feeling, so it was a really like beautiful moment, and it felt good to share in their history and like a country I had never heard of before. And yeah, just such a beautiful moment to be there, and that he was open and available to talk about it, to share in kind of the hurt of the past. So it's really cool.
Okay. So just like can it be from Thailand, or do you want? Okay. Well, so me, Jeremy, and Alex, we went on a whitewater rafting trip, and it was by far the best experience that I had there, and it was pretty sweet. Sarah doesn't know this yet, but we all drove our mopeds up into the mountain. No. But no, our homestays, Fa and Jeannie, they took us, like, yeah, we're gonna go whitewater rafting, and it seemed like we're like kids. So we drive up in the mountain, we get up there, and it looks like a little creek, and there's tubes, and I'm like, oh. It looks like a lazy river, and then, so then I was kind of bummed, and then anyways, the guy's like, yeah, you guys want to buy a couple beers or whatever, so we both bought like a beer or whatever, so, and then we take this truck all the way up the top of the mountain, and then we get off, and I'm just thinking we're gonna just be floating down this river, and then they bring out this bamboo raft that's like from me to Megan for sure, that long, and then you just get like a pole, and so two poles, and so there's two people, one on the back and one on the front, that's like sort of steering the ship, and then there's two people sitting in the middle. So it started off me and Paul, I'm at the back pushing, and she's at the front, and Jeremy, Alex, and Jeannie are sitting in the middle. But like, we open our beer and we're going to step on it, and as soon as we get up within like 10 seconds, our beers are gone. We fell off. Okay, let's scrap the beer idea because this isn't gonna go too well. And so then we start going down, like, oh, this is actually kind of nice. There's like elephants in the water, and it's super sunny and all this stuff. And then the first bit of rapids come, and we're crashing into everything. We're like, okay, this is a lot harder and a lot more dangerous than we thought. And we're like, okay, we're in the clear. So a little while longer. It's only supposed to take like 20 minutes with a guy. It took us like close to 2 hours. And then, so we finally get to this one part, and there's this like British people behind us with a guide, and they're like yelling at us to get out of the way because we're all over the place. I fall off and hit the bottom, and they start going. I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna get to you. And then we're like trying to apologize to these people, and then anyways later on we're like, okay, let's switch us up with like the people steering it. So I took, I think, the back, and I went to the front.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then if you guys want to chime in too. And then this part's actually bad, but it's fun. So we're going down, and there's like, I don't know what it was. Like she fell twice, but the first time, yeah.
She's in the front.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was in the front. That's when we switched over. Yeah. So Alex is sitting right behind her, and I don't know what happened to her stick. It like got like, cause there's these like bends like this, and you got to turn hard, or else you're gonna crash into rocks and stuff like this, and it'd be pretty painful. And she's like at the front, and she got the foot like this, and she gets it stuck in a rock like this, and it comes back, and it flings in her back, folded like this over top of his head. Like it looked like a lawn chair. It was the greatest thing. And then we're like, okay, like this is pretty serious. Like, you all right? Then you got yeah, and then we switched, and then there's this like a massive boulder. Like, oh no, it wasn't even a boulder; it was a mountain. It was huge, like it was out in the front. And then I'm like, okay, we gotta steer hard, or we're gonna we're gonna crash really badly. And then, well, we did, and literally fell off, and all you just see is her head go like this. She's underwater. We're like, where is she? And then she pops up, and she's right back under. And so we all think she's drowning, and so we hop off this thing, and then Alex is stuck between the rock trying to hold like the boat or something.
Okay, so this is what happened from my perspective. Alright, so the raft is turned like this, and it gets jammed, and then Fog was flying off the back into the river. And then like 2 seconds later, Isaac's just like, whoop, and then he just jumps into the river. He's the one steering the raft. So then the raft starts like careening towards the corner. So I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I was like, I knew I had to get out, so we all just jumped off the raft. and just like swam towards like the front of the raft, but like it's open, the water's over our head and everything. So anyways, and the only thing to like actually grab onto in the corner, like to stop the raft from getting jammed in there, is this boulder that's hanging over like here, and the water's like right here. So I literally had to like push my foot up like, all the way on this boulder. And just like, no! I pushed the raft out back. Anyways, and then we beached ourselves and tied the raft.
Yeah, we broke the raft. And then, like after that, me and Jeremy took over, and that was pretty fun. Then it was a little more relaxing, and then there's elephants and elephant poop, and we didn't want to fall in, but Alex and Jeremy, someone kept rocking it, and I was like, don't do that, because I'm not. Okay, yeah. And then actually, then we drove past, and there's like these houses on the side of the, like the, I don't know what it was, but that little kid, he was like pretending to shoot us with guns, so he'd fall off the raft and stuff. We were playing like war with the kids. But yeah, that was awesome, and it was like real. It was the best part of the trip, and we had no pictures because obviously it would be so. But it was definitely the best part of the trip, and like it was so weird. It felt like I was in a movie because it like the sun was going through the leaves. Like I don't know, it was just really cool.
Yeah. So. And then another element of that too is that like it started off really relaxing. We're just like, oh, this is so peaceful with us with our beers, you know, and then just all hell breaks loose. But the problem was that we're just on these logs, right? And then we had our empty beer cans, so we were like trying to keep our empty beer cans on the raft the whole time too. It's like, it's nuts.
This is what happens on the weekend when they're with their homestays. I think at this time Shaggy and I were like sitting in a cafe reading a book. I had no idea what was going on. But no, it sounds like people got to go on a lot of different adventures and see elephants and hang out with elephants and go to different temples and I don't even know, a lot of different spot features. Yes, Greg?
Did Isaac get to go fishing somewhere?
I actually tried, but I wasn't allowed to go alone, and they pick you up, and I was gonna go one day and just say I was with people, and then I just thought,
Honey, when you come back, all the different stories that will come out.
what's that?
Follow the rules, and our group followed all the rules.
Yeah.
Every group did, right?
Only you
SSU
guys.
is just a bunch of rule followers, 100%.
Me and Silas
Yeah.
never did anything.
Okay,
We stayed at home and read books.
yes, I do.
No moped, Brian.
So, bring it back. So, I also want my second question, which again, kind of, I think it's hard to get too specific because we only have a certain amount of time. I definitely encourage you, even though it's months that have passed since this trip, to sit down, and if you haven't asked anybody, I mean, if you've taken a trip, most people in this room have done something with SSU, a travel term, but I find it helpful as someone who's returned from traveling, who gets back into my normal rhythm, to have a conversation months later or a few conversations, because it helps me realize what I learned, it helps me realize what was significant. Maybe at the moment, in that moment, it wasn't significant. With this group, they traveled so well together. It took us 55 hours to get home, and that wasn't any delays. It just took 55 hours to get home. And we had 10 days in Laos that involved a lot of bumpy rides on roads that were challenging, a lot of learning about something that we'd never heard about, like Megan was referring to, that was overwhelming. We have in Thailand so many great relationships that people develop, friendships with buddies at the university and homestay families, and then you have to leave. And so there's a lot of different dynamics that aren't necessarily good and aren't necessarily bad. They're just a combination of emotions and experiences. So I did want to ask, which can kind of tie into the whole something that's significant and meaningful, but more specifically wanting to hear about something on the trip that stretched and or challenged your thinking, because I know that we did encounter things that made us as a group stop and talk to each other about faith and talk about culture, talk about violence, even just talk about how you manage your own expectations or emotions when you're tired, when you're sick, when you've been experiencing, I'm pointing at Alex, when you've experienced some sickness on the road. Fortini also experienced that. So something that stretched and or challenged your thinking. That's what I'd like to hear.
Were you guys not prepared for these questions?
No, it's just hard to choose.
Which means there's multiple.
That's comforting.
Yeah, I have two things. First was, we had talked a lot about kind of what to expect, like with different aspects like homestays or like going to temples or like whatever. We've done a lot of talking, but it's always different when you're actually there in the moment. And one thing we had talked about was kind of like expectations going to visit temples, especially like Buddhist temples, like what to expect and what they might ask you to do, and just like stuff like that. So I thought I'd like prepared myself to like go into that kind of setting, but actually stepping into a temple and then being asked to like prostrate yourself in front of like the statue. I was like prepared to say no because I was not comfortable with doing that, but I was still surprised at how hard it was to stick to that. It was just like with all the pressure, not pressure, but just with everyone else like doing it around you, it was like, oh, okay, no, like I thought through this, but that was definitely a growing experience for me to be able to like know myself well enough to know what I was comfortable with and to be able to say no to that. So that was definitely one area that stretched myself. But another area Sarah had kind of pointed out, yes, I got sick. For like the whole trip of Laos, pretty much, I was like sick throughout that. So my experience of Laos was like white walls in a hotel room, mostly. It's very white walls, which was interesting. I was like, oh my gosh. Kind of almost went crazy because yeah, I like being by myself. Like I'm kind of a loner, so I'm okay with being by myself. But like 10 days by yourself, staring at white walls definitely starts to get to you a little bit. So being able to try to experience a country while being sick and like not feeling great, but still wanting to get something out of it was really interesting. There was this one day, the one thing I wanted to do in Laos was go and visit the planet jars. That's like one thing I've really, really been looking forward to. So the morning, I think that you guys were going to do that, I like psyched myself up. I was like, okay, I can do this. So I still wasn't feeling like great, but I went along and we took like this, I don't know, this like cart kind of thing, up to the top of this hill where the plant jars was. And we were like walking and it was really hot and sunny and it was like hiding in the shade and it was all good. And then I discovered that we were going to have to walk down the hill back down to the building where we had started. And I wasn't expecting to have to like walk back down. So I was like, and you had to stay on this path because you weren't allowed to go off the path because there could be like bombs or whatever. So we're like walking on this path and I could like see the building in front of me and the sun was beating down and I felt like I was in the desert walking towards a mirage that like was not getting any closer. And I was just walking and I was sweating and I was like really starting to get miserable. Oh my gosh, this is awful. I kept on walking and it like wasn't getting any closer. Anyways, finally made it down and we were all just like sitting in the shade. And I remember thinking that was like the worst walk of my life. And then Sarah comes down and she's like, wasn't that absolutely amazing And it just like hit me how different people can experience like the same thing. Because here I was like so miserable. I was like, oh my gosh, that was like the worst thing ever. Like my whole entire life, that was awful. And so I was like, that was so amazing. The sun was so warm and sunny. I love the heat. It was just like, oh wow. But it really like opened my eyes to the fact that different things can be so different for certain people, and just where you are in life or like in health in that moment can really affect how you see things. And so that really encouraged me to just like, even though I wasn't feeling great and it was really hard to do certain things at the time or like be with people just because I didn't feel like talking, I didn't feel like eating, I didn't feel like doing anything. Just to try and live in the moment with people and just try and get as much out of the trip as I could, but not to do too much. So, yeah.
I've never heard her tell that.
No, me neither.
I really appreciate it. Other significant, challenging, stretching moments.
I guess for me it was like when you go to the markets there, like they're used to bargaining and you're kind of told this, but it's really outside like your comfort zone, at least for me, like to go there and try and bargain with these people that like there's really no comparison like from where I come from and probably like all of us as far as wealth goes, and I'm sitting here bargaining from $1 to 50 cents with someone, and then you walk away and just think like these people are trying to make a living, and then you walk away with like I walked away with like a lot of guilt trying to do that, but all the Thai people like our homestays and like this is what you do here, but it's like I get that, but it's like is it that much more for me to just give them their asking price and then you like finally then you kind of get used to it, but then I still kind of think about how odd that is that I'm coming over to their country and I'm bargaining taking them down to a price that's like I don't know, maybe that's not even gonna buy them any. I don't know, like is that gonna help them out? And then I don't know, it just seems so greedy to me, and I didn't like that. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird feeling.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Bossy together?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's this. What would you call it?
So there's a welcoming ceremony where they like create a whole kind of party for you, and
This is in Laos.
In Laos.
And they create this
Flower, like lotus leaf structure with like strings attached to it.
strings, and they call down a spirit, and then holding on to the strings, you get a blessing from this. And so we kind of had known about it before we got there, but then when they
We didn't know
explained
it
it to
that day.
us that day, we were like, oh, this is real, and the spirit, and what does it really mean? And we were like, can we participate in this? And so we all sat and talked and tried to figure out if this is something that we could do with our beliefs and what it really meant.
Like each person, like having to make a decision and like whether I should participate or not. And like what does it mean to them, and does that affect what it really is, or like how does that all work?
It really gave us about 20 minutes to decide too.
Yeah, it's kind of, and we had gone to the Cope Center that morning, so we were already like I was emotionally wrecked, and yeah, so it was really overwhelming to have to choose. But we kind of throughout the trip, like at different temples, like choosing how much you can partake in their religion, which is part of their culture, and how much is okay and how much is not, like figuring that out kind of for yourself, but like with help of others, like talking it out. But the Bossy ceremony was different because it was offered for us, like personally, like as a group to welcome us. So yeah, it felt offensive not to participate, but it's like I don't feel like spiritually safe doing that. So
Yeah, and like we wanted to participate. Like it was something for us, and it was fun. So for me, it was afterwards thinking about it, about how you need to know what you believe and how making decisions can be really hard. And sometimes you have to learn how to make them quickly, and other times you have to be able to step back and be like, I need more time to think about that. But it was like learning that balance was part of that for me.
So kind of like a stretching moment, like in the spiritual way.
Yeah, that ceremony, I think it's worth noting that when we arrived, so anyone who's done a travel term or a long trip, when you get to the last third of the trip, you're in a different physical and emotional state than the beginning of the trip. Not that it's always better or worse, but you're just in a different state, and you are generally more tired. And we had arrived after a long watching the group. Everyone did make their own individual decision. Everyone was still respectful. For some people, it did take a little bit longer to process that, but we also had a really wonderful dynamic where we were able to talk about those things together. And I don't think that's something small to push by, because I think especially at that point in a trip, you only have a week left, you're conserving your energy, and it would be very easy for an individual to say, that just wasn't a good day and I don't want to talk about it, and that was that. But it really continued to be something that we were trying to process and adding up. So yeah, and our hosts were gracious as well. So I think that was a really interesting, when you sometimes get to studying different cultures and intercultural experiences, and then you get into the moment, like Alex was saying, going into a temple, and then you go, oh, this is in front of me now, and it's a real living, breathing person I'm interacting with. How do I decide? And I would just say it wasn't an easy day, but it was an example, I think, of generosity and grace for one another, trying to make those decisions. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Final? We can look at some.
I'd say just traveling is it's challenging. I love you all, but we got pretty exhausted. And also during and after the trip, I think for me, resisting the urge to compare my own experiences with everybody else's was like, with the homestay experience especially, it was a really weird time for us to go because the king just died and it was all weird. And like the family that I mean, the team we were with, they really loved the king, so they were mourning pretty hard and they didn't really want to do anything. So like every morning when we got to school, like everybody would be like saying like, oh, we did this last night, or like whatever. And then
We went to bed at 9.
like, we got some homework done, saw some memes last night.
We're asleep by 9:30.
Yeah.
It was like, I think we did have a good time, but like it was just kind of challenging that like everybody else was doing all these things that I kind of always wanted to do, but like it was my own experience and it was still really awesome. It was just weird, I guess. And the family was awesome. Don't get me wrong. They were lovely. And they like got me bananas all the time.
So the king, this is something to note of, the king of Thailand died the morning that some of the girls were doing a presentation on him. It was a very bizarre experience. They were doing a presentation in orientation, and then I checked the news on the break as they were all walking out, and I said, guys, the king just died. Which I shouldn't laugh, and it's not funny, but it was just one of those moments where we were all just going, wait, what? And then didn't know what that would mean, because to give some context, the king in Thailand was like the father of that country, in the sense that we have Queen Elizabeth, who's not really our queen, she is technically, but we don't associate her in the same way. But the whole country was mandatorily on the 30 days of mourning. All Thai citizens were supposed to be wearing black or white. Some Thai people were being like arrested or warned or fined for not wearing black or white. Foreigners were given more grace on that, but we were stepping into suddenly something that we didn't know if it would be really intense. Like we were preparing for it to be intense, and in some cases it was for some people, but then in some cases it wasn't. But yeah, that definitely framed, especially the start of our time in Thailand, because protocol and hierarchy and speaking of the king and anything about the royal family, there are laws actually against speaking ill of anybody in the royal family. So the king had died, but you were allowed to talk about that, but you also could only talk about it in a certain way. And so I guess another interesting part of the experience.
That was actually really interesting, because I was also taking a class that was around kind of like death and grieving, which provided a really unique opportunity. But I was talking with my host sister, and even just in like the privacy of her house, we like started talking, and at one point I remember her just like slamming up all